The lawyer's voice droned through the conference room like white noise, each word another confirmation that Dr. Sarah Chen had become exactly what her ex-husband predicted, a failure. To my daughter, Sarah Chen, I leave the sum of $1 and the deed to the Impact Research Station, located at coordinates 68.7 degrees north, 149.3 degrees west, Alaska. The silence that followed had texture. Sarah could feel it pressing against her skin, heavy with judgment. Across the mahogany table, her brother Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Beside him, her sister Victoria made a sound that might have been a cough or might have been suppressed laughter. $1. The Meteor lab, Dad abandoned 30 years ago. Sarah's hands remained folded in her lap, her posture straight despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Beside her, 7-year-old Emma shifted in the oversized chair, her small hand finding Sarah's under the table. The touch anchored her, reminded her why she couldn't break, not here, not in front of them. The primary estate, the lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses with practiced efficiency, including the Chicago residence, investment portfolio, and Chen Industries stock holdings, are to be divided equally between Marcus Chen and Victoria Chen Morrison. Marcus received the family business. Victoria got the investment accounts. And Sarah? Sarah got $1 and a frozen building in the Arctic that hadn't been operational since 1994, when her father, Dr. James Chen, had abruptly shuttered his Meteor research facility and returned to Chicago without explanation. That's it? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. She gets the old lab? The lawyer glanced at Sarah with something that might have been sympathy. Dr. Chen was quite specific. The Impact Research Station and all its contents are to go to Sarah exclusively. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the table. All its contents, she repeated. You mean the obsolete equipment and 30 years of dust? The lawyer cleared his throat. I'm simply executing the will as written. Sarah finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. When can I access the property? Marcus laughed outright this time. Access it? Sarah, it's in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. The building's probably collapsed by now. Dad spent millions on that place and then just walked away. It's worthless. Nevertheless, Sarah said, meeting her brother's gaze. It's mine. I'd like the keys and any documentation. Victoria leaned forward, her expression shifting from amusement to something sharper. You're not actually planning to go there? Sarah, be reasonable. You're living in a car with your daughter. You need to focus on getting a real job, not chasing after Dad's abandoned dreams. The words landed like physical blows, precisely aimed at Sarah's most vulnerable points. She was living in her car. She had been for 3 months, ever since her ex-husband David had frozen their joint accounts and the university had eliminated her research position in the latest round of budget cuts. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had once been considered one of the brightest young astrophysicists in the country, was now parking in different 24-hour gym lots each night, washing her daughter's school uniforms in public restrooms, and teaching herself not to cry while Emma slept in the back seat wrapped in every coat they owned. The property taxes are current, the lawyer interjected, sliding a folder across the table towards Sarah. Paid through the end of the year. The deed, keys, and all associated documentation are here. Sarah took the folder, her fingers trembling slightly as they closed around it. Inside was everything. Property deed, coordinates, a set of old-fashioned brass keys, and a sealed envelope with her name written in her father's careful handwriting. This is pathetic, Marcus said, standing and buttoning his suit jacket. Dad clearly wasn't in his right mind at the end. Victoria and I are contesting this. No rational person leaves their homeless daughter a frozen shack while her siblings who actually contributed to the family business get everything else. Victoria gathered her Hermes bag, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Our lawyer will be in touch. Sarah, for Emma's sake, please don't make this difficult. Accept a reasonable settlement and move on with your life. The door closed behind them with a definitive click. The lawyer began packing his briefcase, not quite meeting Sarah's eyes. For what it's worth, Dr. Chen, your father was very clear-minded when he updated his will 3 months ago. He knew exactly what he was doing. 3 months ago, that was when Sarah had visited him in the hospital, when the cancer had already stolen most of his strength, but not his clarity. He'd held her hand with fingers that felt like bird bones and said, "The impact vault, Sarah. When you're ready, check the impact vault." She thought it was the morphine talking, the medications blurring his brilliant mind. Her father had spent his entire career studying meteor impacts, so of course his final words would reference his work. She'd kissed his forehead and promised she understood, even though she didn't. Now, sitting alone in the conference room with her daughter and a folder containing a deed to an abandoned building 800 miles north of Anchorage, those words echoed differently. The impact vault. Mom. Emma's voice was small, tentative. Are they right? Is Grandpa's place really worthless? Sarah looked down at her daughter's upturned face, seeing Chen's dark eyes reflected there. The same intense curiosity that had driven him to spend years in the Arctic studying cosmic debris. Emma had inherited that, along with her mother's stubborn optimism that had been beaten down but never quite extinguished. "I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah said honestly. "But Grandpa left it to us for a reason. Maybe we should find out what that reason was." Emma nodded, accepting this with the adaptability of a child who'd already learned that life rarely made sense. "Can we go see it?" Sarah did the math in her head. She had $847 in her checking account. Her credit card were maxed out. The Honda Civic they'd been sleeping in needed an oil change it probably wouldn't get. Flying to Alaska was impossible. Driving was barely more feasible. But what else did they have? Her career was gone, her marriage destroyed, her savings depleted by legal fees and David's vindictive manipulation of their joint assets. Marcus and Victoria would tie up the estate in litigation for years, and Sarah didn't have the resources to fight them. The lab in Alaska was the only thing that was truly, legally, indisputably hers. "Yes," Sarah said, making the decision in the same moment she spoke it. "Yes, we're going to see it." The drive north took 11 days. Sarah couldn't afford hotels, so they slept in the car as they'd been doing for months, except now they were doing it on purpose, pushing toward a destination rather than just existing in perpetual transit. She stretched their money by buying bread and peanut butter from gas stations, refilling water bottles in public restrooms, letting Emma sleep through breakfast to make the food last longer. They drove through Chicago's sprawl, across the Canadian border with documentation that raised eyebrows, but ultimately held, through British Columbia's mountains, and into the Yukon's vast emptiness. The landscape became increasingly alien, forests giving way to tundra, towns becoming scarcer, the sky expanding until it felt like they were driving across the bottom of an enormous bowl. Emma was remarkably resilient, turning the journey into an adventure, pointing out wildlife, making up stories about the mountains, asking endless questions about space and meteors and what Grandpa had been searching for in the frozen north. Sarah answered what she could, drawing on her astrophysics background, but there was so much about her father's work she didn't know. He'd been secretive about the Alaska station, shuttering it abruptly when she was just 10 years old. She remembered him returning to Chicago changed somehow, quieter, more guarded. He'd sold his research to a private collector. She'd heard, though he never discussed the details. The Honda struggled in the cold as they pushed into Alaska. The check engine light that had been glowing for 600 miles now had company. The temperature gauge climbing into the red whenever they drove uphill, the heater producing barely lukewarm air despite Sarah's constant adjustments. "Just a little further," she whispered to the car, as if it were a tired horse that needed encouragement. "Just get us there." They reached the coordinates on the 13th day. The access road wasn't on any map. Sarah found it only because her father's documentation included hand-drawn directions, a sketch showing where to turn off the highway, how to navigate the unmarked track that wound through stands of black spruce. The road was barely passable. Snow had accumulated despite it being late spring, and the Honda's tires slipped and spun on ice hidden beneath fresh powder. Sarah drove with white knuckles, praying they wouldn't get stuck, that the car wouldn't give up now, not when they were so close. The impact research station appeared suddenly, materializing out of the landscape like something from another world. It wasn't what Sarah had expected. She'd imagined a small building, maybe a few outbuildings, the kind of modest research facility common in remote locations. Instead, what rose before them was something far more substantial, a sprawling complex of interconnected structures built from what looked like reinforced concrete and steel, designed to withstand Arctic conditions. The main building was 3 stories tall, windowless except for narrow observation slits near the roofline. Around it, several smaller structures huddled like satellites around a planet, connected by covered walkways. The entire complex was encased in ice, not just dusted with snow, but actually encrusted in layers of frozen accumulation that gleamed in the weak sunlight like armor. Icicles the size of trees hung from every overhang. The walls were coated in translucent sheets where moisture had frozen and refrozen over decades. "It looks like a castle," Emma breathed. A frozen castle. Sarah parked the Honda and they sat in silence, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at this monument to her father's obsession. 30 years of Arctic weather had transformed the research station into something otherworldly, beautiful, and forbidding in equal measure. The wind picked up, rocking the small car. Sarah checked her phone. No signal, which she'd expected. The temperature gauge read -18 Celsius. She had Emma's winter coat, her own jacket, 2 pairs of gloves between them, and a flashlight with batteries she hoped still worked. "We're going inside?" Emma asked, her voice uncertain for the first time since they'd started this journey. Sarah took a deep breath. "We came all this way. Let's see what Grandpa left us." The main entrance was accessible, though they had to chip away eyes from the doorframe before Sarah could insert the heavy brass key. It turned with surprising smoothness, the lock mechanism still functional despite 3 decades of disuse. The door swung inward with a groan of frozen hinges, releasing a breath of stale, cold air that smelled of dust and metal and something else, something sharp and mineral, like stones after rain. Sarah pulled out her flashlight and stepped inside. The beam revealed a vast entrance hall, far larger than necessary for a research facility. The floor was polished concrete, the walls lined with lockers and equipment racks still holding Arctic gear. Parkas, boots, safety helmets with headlamps attached. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, but surprisingly intact. "Hello," Emma's voice echoed, bouncing off distant walls. More lights. Sarah found a switch near the door and flipped it without much hope. To her shock, ceiling lights flickered to life, dim and struggling, but functional. The building still had power. That was wrong. That was impossible. 30 years without maintenance. And the station still had electricity? Sarah moved deeper into the facility, Emma close behind her, their footsteps leaving tracks in the accumulated dust. The entrance hall opened into a larger space that had clearly been the main laboratory, a cavernous room filled with equipment covered in white sheets like ghosts. Workbenches lined the walls, computers that looked ancient by modern standards, but had probably been cutting edge in 1994, monitoring equipment with dead displays, walls covered in topographic maps and star charts. And everywhere, photographs of meteors. Hundreds of them, pinned to corkboards, taped to walls, organized in meticulous grids. Close-ups of impact sites, aerial surveys of craters, microscopic images of meteor fragments showing crystalline structures that gleamed like frozen fire. Emma wandered toward a workbench where a meteor fragment sat in a display case, the rock's surface pockmarked and scarred. She pressed her face close to the glass. "It's from space." "Yes," Sarah said, moving to join her. The fragment was roughly the size of a basketball, dark and irregular, with veins of something metallic running through it. A label beneath the case read, "Impact Site 7, retrieved August 1993, mass, 8.7 kilograms, classification, unknown." Unknown. Her father, who had spent his life classifying cosmic debris, had labeled this unknown. Sarah's scientific training kicked in despite her exhaustion, her mind automatically analyzing what she saw. The metal veins in the fragment had an unusual luster, not quite like any iron-nickel meteorite she'd studied. The crystalline structure visible in places was wrong somehow. Too regular, too geometric. A sound made them both freeze, a low hum, barely audible, coming from somewhere deeper in the facility. "What is that?" Emma whispered. Sarah listened. It wasn't the wind. It was mechanical, steady, rhythmic. Something was running, some system still operational after all these years. She followed the sound through a doorway into a corridor lined with offices. Most were empty, stripped of personal effects. But one door stood ajar, revealing a space that had clearly been her father's private office. Sarah pushed the door wider. The office was smaller than she expected, almost austere. A metal desk held a computer monitor covered in dust, filing cabinets lined one wall, and a corkboard above the desk was covered in notes written in her father's precise handwriting. But what drew Sarah's attention was the safe built into the wall behind the desk. It was large, industrial, the kind used for extremely valuable or sensitive materials. The door hung slightly open, as if someone had left in a hurry and forgotten to close it fully. Sarah approached carefully, pulling the safe door wider. Inside was mostly empty, just a few folders and a small metal box. She reached for the folders first, opening them to find technical specifications, equations, analysis reports, all dealing with something called Project Vault Impact. The reports were dense with scientific terminology, but certain phrases jumped out. Unprecedented density, extraterrestrial origin confirmed, economic implications substantial, containment essential. The metal box was locked, but the key to the safe also opened it. Inside, Sarah found a letter addressed to her in her father's handwriting and a small black device that looked like a modern keycard, despite the letter being dated 1994. She unfolded the letter with shaking hands. "Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've come to Alaska." "Good. I knew you would. You were always the curious one, the one who asked why until you understood, not just until the explanation satisfied you. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. Know that every word is true. In 1987, I was tracking a meteor shower when I detected an anomaly, a fragment that entered Earth's atmosphere at an impossible angle with characteristics that suggested it wasn't natural debris. It impacted approximately 8 kilometers from what would become this research station. When I excavated the impact site in 1989, I found something that changed my understanding of what's possible. The fragment wasn't just a meteor. It was a carrier, a shell containing material that I can only describe as crystallized stellar matter. Elements created in the heart of dying stars, compressed and preserved in forms that shouldn't exist in nature. Sarah, I found approximately 4 tons of this material. The initial samples I analyzed showed elements on the periodic table that we've barely synthesized in laboratories, elements with properties that rewrite material science. When I discreetly consulted with metallurgists and had the material independently valued, the estimates were staggering. At 1994 market rates, the material was worth approximately $380 million. Adjusted for inflation and increased demand for rare elements, its current value would exceed $600 million. I built the containment vault to protect it. The material is stable, but I couldn't risk it falling into the wrong hands. Corporate interests, foreign governments, private collectors, everyone wanted it once word leaked. So I shut down the station, disappeared the material, and let everyone believe I'd found nothing of value. The vault is below the primary impact chamber. The keycard will grant you access. The combination is Emma's birth date, 1-1-2-0-1-7. I'm sorry I left you with so little, but this was all I had that couldn't be taken, manipulated, or destroyed by those who thought they knew better. Your siblings got money and property, but those things are temporary. What I'm giving you is possibility, the chance to change your life, to provide for Emma, to pursue the research I know you've dreamed of conducting. The material is yours to use as you see fit. Sell it, study it, keep it hidden. The choice is yours. But know that it's real, it's valuable beyond measure, and it's the only inheritance I could give you that they couldn't take away. Trust yourself, Sarah. Trust your training. And remember, the most valuable things are often those that others consider worthless. Love, Dad. Sarah read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold the paper. $600 million for tons of stellar material. A secret her father had kept for 30 years, protecting it from everyone until he could pass it to the one person he trusted to understand its significance. Mom, Emma tugged at her sleeve. What does it say? Sarah knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes. Grandpa left us something special. Something very special. And I think he's been taking care of it all this time, waiting for us. The hum they'd heard earlier made sense now. The building still had power because the containment vault needed it. For 30 years, systems had been running, maintaining whatever conditions were necessary to preserve 4 tons of material worth more than Sarah could comprehend. She stood, pocketing the letter and the key card. Come on, let's find the impact chamber. They found it on the lower level, accessed through a heavy door marked with radiation warnings and biohazard symbols. Precautions, Sarah suspected, meant to keep away anyone who might accidentally stumble upon the facility. The stairs descended into darkness that the ceiling lights barely penetrated. The hum grew louder with each step, accompanied now by a subtle vibration Sarah could feel through the walls. At the bottom, they emerged into a circular chamber roughly 50 feet in diameter. The walls were reinforced concrete, at least 3 feet thick based on the doorway depth. Equipment lined the perimeter, monitors showing green readouts, temperature controls, atmosphere processors still faithfully maintaining conditions specified 3 decades ago. And in the center of the room, set into the floor and descending into darkness, was a circular hatch approximately 10 feet in diameter. It looked like something from a submarine, all steel and rivets, and locking mechanisms designed to create an airtight seal. Next to the hatch was a modern control panel, incongruous among the older equipment. A slot for the keycard and a numeric keypad glowing with soft blue light. Sarah approached slowly, the keycard feeling impossibly light in her hand. This was it. The moment where her father's letter would prove true or false, where her desperate hope would be confirmed or crushed. She slid the keycard into the slot. The panel beeped, and lights changed from red to amber. A screen displayed a prompt. Enter access code. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keypad. Emma's birth date, January 12, 2017. She entered 1-1-2-0-1-7. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the lights turned green, and the hatch began to open. Hydraulics whined as the massive seal broke, releasing a breath of air that was different from the rest of the facility. Cleaner somehow, sterile, carefully filtered and maintained. The hatch swung fully open, revealing a ladder descending into a chamber below, illuminated by soft white light. Sarah peered over the edge. The vault extended roughly 20 feet down, a cylindrical chamber lined with what looked like the same reinforced concrete as the impact chamber above. But what filled the space below made her breath catch. Crystals. Thousands of them, ranging in size from grains of sand to formations as large as her torso, scattered across the vault floor and growing from walls like impossible gardens. They glowed with an inner light, not bioluminescence or any chemical reaction she could identify, but as if they were capturing and refracting ambient light in ways that intensified it. The colors were wrong, too. Not the predictable spectrum of terrestrial minerals, but hues that seemed to exist between known colors, shades her brain struggled to categorize. Blues that were too deep, purples that bordered on ultraviolet, silvers that seemed to shift and flow despite being solid crystal. Among the crystals were chunks of meteor fragment, the same dark, scar material as the sample upstairs, but here in massive pieces, some weighing hundreds of pounds based on their size. And embedded in those fragments, visible even from above, were veins of metal that gleamed like captured starlight. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered, leaning carefully against Sarah to peer down. "It looks like a fairy cave." Sarah's mind raced, her scientific training cataloging observations while her emotions whirled. This wasn't just rare meteor material. This was something unprecedented, possibly unique in human experience. Her father had found stellar matter, elements forged in cosmic fires, delivered to Earth in a cosmic delivery service that had taken millions of years. The economic value was almost secondary to the scientific importance. This material could rewrite textbooks, revolutionize materials science, provide insights into stellar formation and cosmic chemistry that humanity had never possessed. But the economic value was there, undeniable and staggering. $600 million. Sarah Chen, who had been sleeping in her car with her daughter for 3 months, who had $847 in her checking account, who had been told by her siblings that she was pathetic and her inheritance was worthless, was standing above a vault containing more wealth than most people could imagine. The irony wasn't lost on her. Marcus had received Chen Industries, worth perhaps $50 million, impressive by any standard. Victoria had gotten investment portfolios worth another $30 million. Combined, her siblings had inherited roughly $80 million in assets. Sarah had been given something worth nearly 8 times that amount, disguised as abandonment, wrapped in mockery, presented as proof of her father's disappointment. She started laughing, the sound echoing strangely in the impact chamber, mixing with Emma's concerned questions and the steady hum of the vault's environmental systems. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah pulled Emma into a hug, still laughing, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, baby. Yes, I'm okay. We're okay. We're more than okay." She thought of Marcus's smirk in the lawyer's office, Victoria's perfectly calculated disdain, their casual certainty that Sarah had received nothing of value. They'd already contacted their lawyers to contest the will, confident they could bully their homeless sister into accepting whatever settlement they deemed appropriate. They had no idea what their father had really left her, and Sarah wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. Not until she'd figured out exactly what to do with this impossible inheritance, how to protect it, how to ensure that Emma's future was secured before her siblings could find any way to take it from them. The Impact Vault had kept its secret for 30 years. It could keep it a little longer. Sarah pulled back from Emma, wiping her eyes and forcing her mind into analytical mode. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we document everything: photos, video, detailed observations. Then we need to secure this place properly, make sure no one can access it without our permission." "Are we staying here?" Emma asked, looking around the sterile chamber with uncertain eyes. Sarah hesitated. The research station was livable. It had heat, power, what looked like functional plumbing. But it was also isolated, 800 miles from the nearest major city, accessible only by a barely passable road that would be completely impassable in winter. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unexpected out here, where cell service shouldn't exist. She pulled it out and found a single bar of signal, just enough for messages to trickle through. 3 texts from Marcus. Lawyer filed preliminary contest. Don't waste money fighting it. Settlement offer attached. 2 from Victoria. This is for your own good. Think about Emma's stability. And 1 from a number she didn't recognize. Dr. Chen, this is Grant Fletcher, Denver Museum of Natural History. Your father contacted us several times regarding material from his Alaska research station. We're very interested in discussing potential acquisition or partnership. Please call at your earliest convenience. Sarah stared at the last message, her mind spinning. Her father had been in contact with museums? Had he been planning to reveal the vault's contents before his death? Or had someone else leaked information about the station's true purpose? She thought of the sealed safe in her father's office, the security measures throughout the facility, the 30 years of secrecy. If word had gotten out about the vault's contents, others would be interested, very interested. Museums would be the benign option. Private collectors, corporate interests, foreign governments, they'd all want access to material this rare and valuable. "We need to be careful," Sarah said, more to herself than to Emma. Very careful. She took photos of the vault from above, documenting the crystal formations, the meteor fragments, the glowing material that represented their future. Then she closed the hatch, watching the seals engage, the locking mechanisms slide into place. The keycard went into her pocket, joining her father's letter. Emma's birth date was safe in her memory. The vault was secured. Now, they needed to figure out their next move. They explored the rest of the facility methodically. The upper floors contained living quarters, small dormitory-style rooms with bunk beds, a communal kitchen that still had canned goods in the pantry, decades old but potentially edible, bathrooms with plumbing that ran brown for several minutes before clearing to something approaching clean water. The environmental systems had kept the interior temperature above freezing, preventing pipe bursts and major structural damage. Solar panels on the roof, supplemented by what looked like geothermal power from nearby hot springs, had provided enough electricity to maintain essential systems. Her father had designed this place to survive, to wait, to protect its secret until someone came looking for it. As evening approached, Sarah and Emma settled in one of the dormitory rooms. Sarah made peanut butter sandwiches from their dwindling supplies while Emma explored, chattering about the facility, asking endless questions about space and meteors and whether they could really stay in a frozen castle. "For tonight, yes," Sarah said. "Tomorrow we need to make some decisions." But Emma was already asleep, exhausted from the day's discoveries, curled under blankets Sarah had found in a supply closet, her breath making small clouds in the chilly air. Sarah sat by the window, one of the few in the building, and watched stars emerge in the Arctic sky. The aurora borealis danced on the horizon, curtains of green and purple light that seemed to mirror the crystalline glow of the material in the vault below. She thought about her father, spending years in this place, excavating cosmic treasure while the world assumed he was wasting time on fruitless research. She thought about how he must have felt, knowing what he discovered, unable to share it, protecting it from those who would exploit it without understanding its significance. And she thought about Marcus and Victoria, who had inherited money and property and the family business, who had everything except the one thing that really mattered, their father's true trust. James Chen had looked at his 3 children and made a choice. He'd given his eldest 2 the visible assets, the conventional inheritance that would satisfy the lawyers and accountants and anyone who measured success in dollars and deeds. But to Sarah, his youngest, the one who'd followed in his footsteps into astrophysics, the one who'd shared his love of the cosmos and his curiosity about the universe's deepest mysteries, he'd given something else entirely. He'd given her a fortune disguised as nothing. He'd given her validation wrapped in apparent abandonment. He'd given her the chance to prove to herself and everyone else that she was capable of seeing value where others saw only waste. Her phone buzzed again. More messages from Marcus and Victoria, increasingly frustrated by her lack of response to their settlement offers. A follow-up from Grant Fletcher at the museum, and a new one from a number with an international prefix. "Dr. Chen, we represent private interests extremely interested in materials from the Impact Research Station. Name your price." Sarah deleted the last message without responding. She wasn't ready to deal with any of this yet. She needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to protect what she'd found and ensure Emma's future was secure before she made any moves. But one thing was certain, she wasn't selling. Not to museums, not to private collectors, not to anyone, at least not yet. This material was too important, too valuable, too dangerous in the wrong hands. Her father had known that. That's why he'd hidden it for 3 decades. Now Sarah had to honor that choice, while also finding a way to transform this inheritance into the future she and Emma desperately needed. She pulled out her father's letter and read it again in the light of the aurora, his words taking on new weight. "Trust yourself, Sarah. Trust your training. And remember, the most valuable things are often those that others consider worthless." Outside, the wind howled across the tundra, rattling the building's reinforced walls. Inside, the environmental systems hummed steadily, maintaining their vigil, protecting secrets worth more than Sarah had ever imagined. Tomorrow would bring decisions, challenges, complications. But tonight, for the first time in months, Sarah Chun slept in a real bed, in a building that belonged to her, knowing that somewhere below her, in a vault designed to last centuries, was the answer to every prayer she'd been too exhausted to voice. Her father had called it the Impact Vault. Sarah was beginning to understand why. Morning came late in the Arctic spring, light creeping reluctantly across the frozen landscape. Sarah woke to find Emma already up, nose pressed against the narrow window, watching a caribou herd move across the distant tundra. "Mom, can we explore more today?" Emma's breath fogged the glass. "There are so many rooms we haven't seen yet." Sarah stretched, feeling muscles protest. She'd slept better than she had in months, despite the unfamiliar bed and the cold that seeped through the walls. There was something about having walls around them, a door that locked, a space that was definitively theirs, that had allowed her to sleep deeply for the first time since David had destroyed their life. "Yes, but first we need to understand what we're dealing with," Sarah said, swinging her legs out of bed. "This isn't just a building, Emma. It's a research facility with complex systems that have been running for 30 years. We need to know what we have before we can decide what to do with it." They started in the main laboratory, and Sarah began working through her father's records systematically. Filing cabinets yielded notebooks filled with observations, calculations, and analysis results spanning from 1987 through 1994. Computer hard drives, though old, might still contain valuable data if she could get them running. The photographs covering the walls told a story Sarah had never heard before. Her father's Meteor research had begun conventionally enough, tracking known showers, analyzing composition, mapping impact sites. But in 1987, the focus shifted dramatically. Entire walls were devoted to a single impact event, documented from dozens of angles, analyzed in minute detail. Sarah found herself drawn into her father's methodology, recognizing her own scientific approach in his meticulous documentation. He'd been brilliant, thorough, driven by the kind of curiosity that didn't accept surface answers. "Dr. Chen." The voice from the doorway made Sarah spin around, heart hammering. A man stood in the entrance to the laboratory, tall, weathered, probably in his 60s, wearing heavy Arctic gear and carrying what looked like a toolbox. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" The man raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "Name's Thomas Birch. I'm the caretaker. Been maintaining this place since James shut it down in '94. Sarah's mind raced. "A caretaker? For 30 years? My father hired you, paid in advance through 2025. He set up an account, automated payments, instructions to keep the systems running, prevent deterioration, and most importantly, he nodded toward the floor, toward the vault below. Keep the containment systems operational. No questions asked." Emma peered around Sarah's legs, studying the newcomer with open curiosity. Thomas smiled at her, his weathered face creasing. "You must be Emma. James showed me pictures. Said his granddaughter would love the aurora." The mention of Emma by name, the casual reference to her father, convinced Sarah more than any credentials could have. "You knew my father well?" "Well enough. He was a good man, brilliant scientist. Obsessive about this place." Thomas set down his toolbox. "I maintain the generators, repair the heating systems, keep the solar panels clear, monitor the environmental controls for the vault. Every 2 weeks, I drive up from the lodge. I run about 60 miles south, make sure everything's functioning." "Did he tell you what's in the vault?" Thomas shook his head. "Not my business. James made it clear. I maintain systems, I don't ask questions." He paid well enough that I could afford not to be curious. Sarah studied him, weighing her options. If Thomas had been maintaining the facility for 30 years without compromising it, he was either supremely trustworthy or patient enough to wait decades for an opportunity to betray that trust. The latter seemed less likely than the former. "The systems are still functioning?" she asked. "Solar panels needed cleaning this morning, but yes. Everything's optimal. Vault's been stable for 30 years. He paused. "Though you should know, you're not the only one interested in this place." Sarah felt ice in her stomach. "What do you mean?" 3 different groups have approached me in the last month, asking about the station, offering money for access, for information, for keys I don't have. Museum people, some corporate types, and yesterday, a group that didn't identify themselves but gave me very uncomfortable feelings. The international message on her phone. The museum inquiry. Word was spreading faster than Sarah had anticipated. "I didn't tell them anything," Thomas continued, "but they're not going to stop asking. James knew this would happen eventually. He said when the time came, his daughter would know what to do. The trust her father had placed in her felt overwhelming. I'm still figuring that out." Thomas nodded. Take your time. I'll be around if you need anything. Got supplies in my truck if you need food, better cold weather gear. That Honda of yours isn't going to survive another trip south without serious work. He left as quietly as he'd arrived, footsteps crunching across frozen ground. Sarah sank into one of the laboratory chairs, mind whirling. The situation was more complicated than she'd realized. People knew about the station, were asking questions, offering money. How long before subtle inquiries became aggressive pursuit? Her phone buzzed. Marcus, settlement offer expires in 48 hours. After that, we pursue full litigation. Think about what's best for Emma. The hypocrisy was stunning. Her siblings, who had inherited millions, were threatening to drag her through court over a building they considered worthless, purely out of principle and spite. They couldn't stand that their homeless sister had received anything, even something they believed was valueless. They had no idea they were threatening to fight her for access to $600 million. Sarah made a decision. She opened her laptop, connected to the station's surprisingly robust satellite internet, another expense her father had prepaid for decades, and began researching. Not just the material in the vault, but legal protections, property rights, laws governing mineral discoveries, precedents for similar cases. What she learned over the next several hours was both encouraging and terrifying. The material was hers, legally. Alaska's property laws were clear. What was found on her land belonged to her. But selling it, transporting it, even fully analyzing it would require navigating complex federal regulations, especially given the material's extraterrestrial origin. Museums would want it. Universities would want to study it. Private collectors would pay staggering sums for even small samples. Foreign governments would be interested if they learned of its existence. And her siblings would absolutely contest her ownership if they discovered the vault's true value. Sarah spent the afternoon photographing everything in her father's office. Every note, every calculation, every piece of documentation that proved he'd discovered, excavated, and legally acquired the material in the vault. She copied hard drives, scanned documents, created redundant backups, stored both locally and in encrypted cloud storage. If Marcus and Victoria wanted to challenge her inheritance, she would bury them in evidence that their father had specifically, deliberately, carefully ensured Sarah received the Impact Vault and all its contents. As she worked, Emma explored under Thomas's watchful supervision, the older man showing her how the environmental systems functioned, explaining in simple terms how solar panels worked, how the geothermal taps provided backup power. By evening, Sarah had compiled a comprehensive record of everything in the facility. She'd also drafted a letter to her siblings' lawyers, declining their settlement offer and stating her intention to defend her inheritance. The man raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture. Name's Thomas Birch. I'm the caretaker. Been maintaining this place since James shut it down in '94. Sarah's mind raced. A caretaker? For 30 years? My father hired you. Paid in advance through 2025. He set up an account, automated payments, instructions to keep the systems running, prevent deterioration, and most importantly, he nodded toward the floor, toward the vault below. Keep the containment systems operational. No questions asked. Emma peered around Sarah's legs, studying the newcomer with open curiosity. Thomas smiled at her, his weathered face creasing. You must be Emma. James showed me pictures. Said his granddaughter would love the aurora. The mention of Emma by name, the casual reference to her father, convinced Sarah more than any credentials could have. You knew my father well? Well enough. He was a good man, brilliant scientist. Obsessive about this place. Thomas set down his toolbox. I maintain the generators, repair the heating systems, keep the solar panels clear, monitor the environmental controls for the vault. Every 2 weeks, I drive up from the lodge. I run about 60 miles south, make sure everything's functioning. Did he tell you what's in the vault? Thomas shook his head. Not my business. James made it clear. I maintain systems, I don't ask questions. He paid well enough that I could afford not to be curious. Sarah studied him, weighing her options. If Thomas had been maintaining the facility for 30 years without compromising it, he was either supremely trustworthy or patient enough to wait decades for an opportunity to betray that trust. The latter seemed less likely than the former. "The systems are still functioning?" she asked. "Solar panels needed cleaning this morning, but yes. Everything's optimal. Vault's been stable for 30 years. He paused. "Though you should know, you're not the only one interested in this place." Sarah felt ice in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "3 different groups have approached me in the last month, asking about the station, offering money for access, for information, for keys I don't have. Museum people, some corporate types, and yesterday, a group that didn't identify themselves but gave me very uncomfortable feelings." The international message on her phone. The museum inquiry. Word was spreading faster than Sarah had anticipated. "I didn't tell them anything," Thomas continued, "but they're not going to stop asking. James knew this would happen eventually. He said when the time came, his daughter would know what to do. The trust her father had placed in her felt overwhelming. I'm still figuring that out." Thomas nodded. "Take your time. I'll be around if you need anything. Got supplies in my truck if you need food, better cold weather gear. That Honda of yours isn't going to survive another trip south without serious work." He left as quietly as he'd arrived, footsteps crunching across frozen ground. Sarah sank into one of the laboratory chairs, mind whirling. The situation was more complicated than she'd realized. People knew about the station, were asking questions, offering money. How long before subtle inquiries became aggressive pursuit? Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, settlement offer expires in 48 hours. After that, we pursue full litigation. Think about what's best for Emma." The hypocrisy was stunning. Her siblings, who had inherited millions, were threatening to drag her through court over a building they considered worthless, purely out of principle and spite. They couldn't stand that their homeless sister had received anything, even something they believed was valueless. They had no idea they were threatening to fight her for access to $600 million. Sarah made a decision. She opened her laptop, connected to the station's surprisingly robust satellite internet, another expense her father had prepaid for decades, and began researching. Not just the material in the vault, but legal protections, property rights, laws governing mineral discoveries, precedents for similar cases. What she learned over the next several hours was both encouraging and terrifying. The material was hers, legally. Alaska's property laws were clear. What was found on her land belonged to her. But selling it, transporting it, even fully analyzing it would require navigating complex federal regulations, especially given the material's extraterrestrial origin. Museums would want it. Universities would want to study it. Private collectors would pay staggering sums for even small samples. Foreign governments would be interested if they learned of its existence. And her siblings would absolutely contest her ownership if they discovered the vault's true value. Sarah spent the afternoon photographing everything in her father's office, every note, every calculation, every piece of documentation that proved he'd discovered, excavated, and legally acquired the material in the vault. She copied hard drives, scanned documents, created redundant backups, stored both locally and in encrypted cloud storage. If Marcus and Victoria wanted to challenge her inheritance, she would bury them in evidence that their father had specifically, deliberately, carefully ensured Sarah received the impact vault and all its contents. As she worked, Emma explored under Thomas's watchful supervision, the older man showing her how the environmental systems functioned, explaining in simple terms how solar panels worked, how the geothermal taps provided backup power. By evening, Sarah had compiled a comprehensive record of everything in the facility. She'd also drafted a letter to her siblings' lawyers, declining their settlement offer and stating her intention to defend her inheritance. All research documentation. The transaction can be completed within 48 hours. Funds transferred to any account you designate. $30 million. It was an enormous sum, life-changing for most people. It was also a fraction of what the material was actually worth. Sarah kept her expression neutral. "And if I'm not interested in selling?" Victoria's smile thinned. "Dr. Chen, let's be realistic. You're a single mother, recently unemployed, with no resources to properly secure, analyze, or monetize whatever your father left here. Stellardyne has the infrastructure, the expertise, and the legal team to handle materials of this nature. We're offering you enough money to completely transform your life, and we're offering it now, before the situation becomes complicated. Complicated how? Your siblings are contesting your inheritance. Your father's research attracted attention from multiple international parties. And there are questions about whether extraterrestrial materials of potential commercial value fall under private property rights or federal jurisdiction. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a more intimate register. Sell to us now, Dr. Chen. Take the money, provide security for your daughter, and walk away before this becomes a legal nightmare that could drag on for years while lawyers consume whatever value exists here. It was a good pitch, Sarah had to admit. Reasonable, persuasive, backed by the implicit threat of prolonged litigation. But there was something in Victoria's urgency that revealed more than her words. Stellardine wouldn't be offering $30 million unless they knew the material was worth significantly more. I'll consider your offer, Sarah said, but I'll need time to consult with my own attorneys and have the material independently assessed. Victoria's mask slipped further. Dr. Chen, I should mention that Stellardine has very good relationships with relevant federal agencies. If we determine that national security interests are involved with materials on this property, we have channels to pursue governmental acquisition. It would be unfortunate if eminent domain proceedings became necessary. There it was, the threat beneath the professional courtesy. Sell to us, or we'll find a way to take it. Thomas moved to stand beside Sarah, his presence a silent statement. Victoria noticed, her gaze flicking to the older man with calculation. Think carefully, Dr. Chen, Victoria said. My helicopter leaves in 15 minutes. I'd very much like you to be on it with a signed letter of intent. If not, she shrugged. Well, we'll pursue other options. Sarah closed the door and locked it, watching through the window as Victoria returned to her security team. They conferred briefly. Then one of the men pulled out surveying equipment and began photographing the exterior of the facility. They're going to come back, Thomas said quietly. And they won't ask nicely next time. Sarah's mind raced. Victoria Ashford's visit changed everything. She'd hoped to have time to strategically manage the vault's revelation, to control the narrative, to ensure she negotiated from a position of strength. Instead, powerful interests were already circling, already planning how to separate her from her inheritance. I need to move faster than I planned, Sarah said. Thomas, how quickly could you help me extract samples from the vault? Small enough to transport easily, but representative enough to prove value. Thomas considered. Half a day if we're careful. But Dr. Chen, if you're thinking of traveling with that material, you need to know it's not stable in the conventional sense. Your father's notes mentioned keeping it at specific temperatures, specific atmospheric conditions. Take it out of the vault's environment, and there's risk. What kind of risk? The kind where things that glow might start glowing a lot brighter, or might decide they don't want to be solid anymore. Sarah processed this. Her father had been protecting the material not just from theft, but from degradation or potentially dangerous reactions. The vault wasn't just storage, it was containment, carefully engineered to preserve material that behaved in ways terrestrial minerals didn't. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Victoria Chamorrison and I are filing emergency injunction to freeze all estate assets pending litigation. Includes Alaska property. Sheriff will serve papers today. Sarah felt cold that had nothing to do with the Arctic temperature. Her siblings were moving to legally lock down the research station before she could do anything with it. They still thought they were fighting over a worthless building, but the legal effect would be the same. She'd lose access to the vault while years of litigation ground forward. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Dr. Chen, this is Elizabeth Morgan, investigative journalist, Science Today magazine. I'm working on a story about your father's Meteor research and rumors of significant discoveries at his Alaska facility. Would love to interview you. This is going to be public soon. Better you control the narrative. The walls were closing in from multiple directions. Corporate interests like Stellardine, her own siblings, now potentially media attention that would draw even more predators. Sarah made a series of rapid decisions. Thomas, I need your help. Can you extract 3 sample containers from a vault? small enough to fit in a backpack, but valuable enough to prove to independent assessors what we're dealing with. I can do that. Where are you planning? I'm going to Denver. There's a museum director who knew my father, who's been trying to reach me. If anyone can independently verify the material's value and help me navigate this legally, it might be him. What about the girl? Sarah looked toward the dormitory where Emma was waiting, taking her daughter on a flight to Denver, carrying potentially unstable extraterrestrial material worth millions, while corporate interests and her own family circled like sharks, seemed insane. Leaving Emma here while Sarah traveled seemed worse. She comes with me. We're safer together. Over the next 6 hours, Sarah and Thomas worked methodically in the impact chamber. The vault's hatch opened to reveal its crystalline treasures, glowing softly in the controlled environment. Thomas had done this before, Sarah realized. He moved with practiced efficiency, knowing exactly how to handle the material, what tools to use, how to maintain proper conditions. They selected 3 samples. The first was a chunk of the dark meteor shell, roughly the size of a softball, its surface scarred by atmospheric entry, but its interior showing veins of that impossible metallic substance. The second was a cluster of crystals, the smaller formations Sarah had seen, ranging from grain size to marble size, displaying that spectrum of colors that made her eyes ache when she looked too long. The third was the most spectacular, a single large crystal, roughly the size of her fist, that seemed to contain layers of different materials, like geological strata compressed into impossible density. Each sample went into a specialized container Thomas retrieved from a storage room, vacuum-sealed, temperature-controlled, with monitoring equipment that would alert them to any changes in the material's state. Your father designed these specifically for transport, Thomas explained. He knew someday someone would need to move samples. The containers maintain vault conditions for approximately 72 hours. After that, you need to return the material to containment or risk degradation. What happens if it degrades? Thomas's expression was grim. Based on your father's notes? Nothing good. The material wants to return to its natural state, which is basically stellar plasma compressed to impossible densities. Let it warm up too much, expose it to wrong atmospheric conditions, and it starts releasing energy. Slowly at first, but accelerating. Are you saying these samples could explode? Not explode. That's chemical reaction, quick and violent. This would be more like unraveling, piece by piece converting back to energy. Your father calculated that even a small sample, if fully degraded, would release energy equivalent to several tons of TNT. Sarah stared at the containers in her backpack with new appreciation for their father's caution. He hadn't just been hiding treasure. He'd been containing cosmic power, material that existed in states that shouldn't be possible on Earth. Why didn't he tell anyone? Sarah asked. If this is so dangerous, why keep it secret? Thomas sealed the final container. He tried. Early on, before he understood what he had, he contacted federal agencies, offered to share his findings. They laughed at him, thought he was another crackpot claiming to have found alien technology. So he stopped asking permission and just did the work. And then someone took him seriously. Military contractors, foreign interests, people who wanted the material for reasons your father didn't approve of. So he shut down, hid it, waited for someone he could trust. Thomas looked at her directly. He waited for you. Sarah shouldered the backpack, feeling the weight of 3 samples that represented perhaps 1% of the vault's total contents, but still worth millions. Will you keep watching the facility while I'm gone? Of course. But Dr. Chen, be careful. People willing to fly helicopters to remote Alaska stations are willing to do a lot more to get what they want. Sarah found Emma reading in the dormitory, one of her father's old notebooks open beside her. Pack your things, sweetheart. We're going on a trip. Where? Denver. I need to talk to some people about Grandpa's work. Emma's eyes widened. Are we taking some of the glowing rocks? Yes. But Emma, this is important. We can't tell anyone what's in my backpack. Not yet. Can you do that? Her daughter nodded with the seriousness of a child who'd already learned that life required secrets sometimes. Is it dangerous? Sarah thought about the energy calculations, the 72-hour window, the force is closing in from multiple directions. It might be, but we're going to be smart and careful, and we're going to make sure no one takes away what Grandpa left us. They flew out that afternoon from Dead Horse, the nearest airstrip with commercial service, leaving the Honda with Thomas. Sarah had used her nearly maxed credit card to book the flights, watching the balance climb to terrifying levels while trying not to calculate how long it would take to pay off if this gamble didn't work out. The backpack stayed with her through security. The containers were lead-lined, shielded, designed to pass through scanners without raising alarms. Thomas had assured her they were safe for transport. Still, Sarah's heart hammered as they moved through the checkpoint, expecting at any moment for alarms to sound, for security to pull her aside, for everything to unravel. They passed through without incident. The flight to Anchorage, then the connection to Denver, passed in a blur of anxiety and planning. Sarah drafted emails to Grant Fletcher at the museum, carefully worded to suggest she had important material to discuss without explicitly stating what. She researched property law, mineral rights, federal regulations governing extraterrestrial materials. What she learned wasn't encouraging. The legal landscape was murky. Private ownership of meteorite materials was generally accepted, but there were no clear precedents for materials as valuable and potentially dangerous as what her father had collected. Federal agencies could make arguments for seizure based on national security, scientific importance, or public safety. Emma slept against her shoulder, oblivious to the cosmic cargo in the backpack at Sarah's feet, to the messages piling up on Sarah's phone as word of their departure spread. Marcus, running isn't going to help your case. Judges don't look favorably on people who flee with disputed property. Victoria Ashford, Dr. Chen, I'm disappointed you didn't accept our offer. Stellardine's patience isn't unlimited. Elizabeth Morgan, Dr. Chen, I'm running my story with or without your input. Last chance to tell your side. And one new message that made Sarah's blood run cold, from a number with no caller ID. We know what you're carrying. $12 million for the samples, no questions asked. Refuse, and we take them anyway. Sarah deleted the last message, her hand shaking. How did they know? How could anyone know what she was transporting? She looked around the airplane cabin with new paranoia. Were they being watched? Followed? Had someone tagged her luggage, her phone, her somehow? The backpack between her feet suddenly felt like a bomb, like a target, like the most dangerous thing she'd ever carried. They landed in Denver at sunset, the city spread below them like a circuit board, lights beginning to glow against gathering darkness. Sarah had reserved the cheapest hotel room she could find near the museum, paying with her credit card while trying not to think about the mounting debt. The hotel was budget quality at best, thin walls, suspicious stains on the carpet, a view of the parking lot. But it had a lock on the door and enough space for both of them, and right now that was sufficient. Sarah set the backpack in the room's small safe, then spent 10 minutes verifying it was actually secured before she allowed herself to breathe. Can we get pizza? Emma asked, her resilience remarkable as always. Yes, we can get pizza. They ate cheap takeout, while Sarah confirmed her meeting with Grant Fletcher for the next morning. The museum director had responded immediately to her carefully worded email. Dr. Chen, I'm very glad you reached out. Your father would be proud. Come tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring whatever you think I should see. Sarah tried to sleep, but couldn't, her mind churning through scenarios. Best case, Fletcher verified the material's value, helped her establish legal ownership, potentially facilitated a sale or partnership that would secure Emma's future. Worst case, he confiscated the samples as culturally significant artifacts, called federal authorities, or simply decided that a homeless single mother had no business controlling material this important. Around midnight, someone knocked on their hotel room door. Sarah sat up instantly, heart racing. Emma stirred, but didn't wake. Another knock, soft but insistent. Sarah crept to the door, looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, Asian, mid-40s, wearing a business suit despite the late hour, alone. Dr. Chen. The woman's voice was quiet, meant not to wake other guests. My name is Dr. Lisa Park. I'm a mineralogist with the USGS. I need to speak with you about your father's research. It's urgent. Sarah didn't open the door. How did you find me? Your flight was tracked. I'm sorry for the intrusion, but this couldn't wait. I know what your father discovered in Alaska. I know what you're carrying, and I know you're in danger. From whom? From everyone who wants what you have. Stellardine is just the beginning. There are at least 6 major interests aware of the vault's existence: corporations, foreign governments, private collectors. Your hotel will be watched by morning. Please, let me help you. Sarah's mind raced. This could be another trap, another predator in helpful disguise. Or it could be genuine, a fellow scientist recognizing the importance of the discovery and its dangers. Why should I trust you? A long pause. Because your father trusted me. We corresponded for 3 years before his death. He shared his findings with me confidentially, asked me to help protect the material if anything happened to him. Check your father's office computer at the research station. You'll find our emails in a folder marked LP Consultation. Sarah pulled out her phone, accessing the remote connection to the station's system she'd established. It took several minutes of searching, but she found them, hundreds of emails between James Chen and Lisa Park, dated from 2021 through 2024, discussing the material's properties, its preservation requirements, legal strategies for protecting it. In the most recent email, dated a week before her father's death, James had written, "If anything happens to me, Sarah will inherit the vault. Please help her understand what she's protecting and how to do it safely. She's brilliant, but has no idea what's coming." Sarah opened the door. Lisa Park looked exhausted, stressed, like someone who'd been traveling urgently. She nodded thanks and stepped inside, immediately moving to the window to check the parking lot below. "You need to move from this hotel," Lisa said without preamble. "Stellardine has surveillance on the building. I counted at least 3 vehicles in positions to monitor all exits." "How do you know?" "Because I've been tracking them since they started circulating inquiries about your father's research 6 months ago. They're not the only ones. Chinese state interests, Russian collectors, American defense contractors. Everyone wants those samples." She turned from the window. "Dr. Chen, your father discovered something that could revolutionize materials science, energy production, possibly even propulsion systems. The economic implications are staggering. People will kill for it." The blunt statement hung in the air. Sarah glanced at Emma, still sleeping, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. "What do you suggest?" Lisa pulled out a folder. "First, we establish independent verification of the material's properties and value. I've arranged laboratory access at the Colorado School of Mines under a confidential project designation. Second, we file preemptive claims with relevant federal agencies, establishing your legal ownership before anyone can challenge it. Third, we secure the Alaska facility properly, not just physically, but legally, making it bulletproof against seizure attempts." "And what do you want in return?" Lisa smiled slightly. "Academic credit. A paper or 3. The opportunity to study the most significant extraterrestrial material discovery in human history." She paused. "Your father promised me that, assuming whoever inherited the vault shared his values. Was he right?" Sarah thought of her father's letter, his careful planning, his trust in her judgment. He'd built a network of allies. Thomas maintaining the facility, Lisa providing scientific expertise, undoubtedly others Sarah hadn't discovered yet. He'd known she would need help, had arranged it in advance. "How do we get out of this hotel without being followed?" Lisa's smile widened. "I have a van in the underground parking garage, different from the vehicle I arrived in. We load your things through the service entrance. Emma sleeps through the transfer if we're lucky, and you're in a secured location before Stellardine realizes you've moved." They executed the plan 45 minutes later. Lisa had been thorough. The service entrance was unwatched, the underground garage clear, the van nondescript and clean. Emma woke briefly during the transfer, but fell back asleep in the van's back seat, wrapped in blankets. Lisa drove them to an unassuming residential neighborhood in Lakewood, pulling into the garage of a modest house. "My home, not registered under my name, owned through a trust. It's not perfect security, but it's better than a hotel that's actively monitored." Inside, Lisa had set up what looked like a home laboratory. Equipment for material analysis, monitoring systems, reference materials covering every surface. I study meteor impacts for the USGS, she explained. This is my private workspace. She made tea while Sarah settled Emma on a couch. When they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, Lisa's expression turned serious. Show me what you brought. Sarah retrieved the backpack from the van, set on the table, and carefully opened the specialized containers. Even in the dim kitchen light, the samples were spectacular. The meteor shell with its veins of impossible metal, the crystal cluster with its spectrum of colors that didn't quite exist, the large crystal that seemed to contain layers of compressed starlight. Lisa put on specialized gloves and examination glasses, handling each sample with reverent care. She took measurements, ran portable spectroscopy equipment, made notes with the focused intensity of a scientist confronting something that redefined her understanding of what was possible. After an hour, she looked up, and Sarah saw tears in her eyes. Your father wasn't exaggerating. If anything, he undersold it. Lisa's voice shook slightly. These aren't just rare elements, Dr. Chen. Some of the crystalline structures shouldn't exist outside stellar cores. The metallic compounds include elements we've only theorized about. The energy density. She trailed off, consulting her notes. Conservative estimate, based on these samples alone, you're carrying approximately $40 million worth of material. Sarah's breath caught. 40 million. For 3 small samples. The full vault? She asked. At minimum, 600 million. Possibly more, depending on composition consistency throughout the deposit. Lisa set down her instruments. Dr. Chen, Sarah, do you understand what this means? This isn't just wealth. This is scientific revolution. Materials with these properties could transform energy storage, create new superconductors, enable technologies we haven't even imagined yet. And everyone wants it. Everyone wants it, Lisa confirmed, which is why we need to move quickly. Tomorrow, we do proper laboratory analysis, establish documented verification from multiple independent sources. Then we contact the best intellectual property attorney in Colorado, someone who specializes in complex mineral rights and novel material claims. I have a meeting at the Denver Museum at 9. Lisa nodded. Grant Fletcher. Good. He's trustworthy, and museum backing would help establish cultural and scientific significance, which strengthens your ownership claims. But after that meeting, we need to move fast. Your siblings' injunction, Stellardine's interest, the other parties circling, we have maybe 72 hours before someone makes a serious move against you. Sarah thought of the threatening message on her phone. Someone already has. Anonymous offer to buy the samples, with implicit threat to take them by force if I refused. Lisa's expression darkened. That sounds like Viktor Sokolov, Russian oligarch, made his money in rare earth mining, has no boundaries when it comes to acquiring valuable materials. If he's involved, we're dealing with someone who literally has private military contractors on payroll. Should I go to the police? And tell them what? That you're being threatened over extraterrestrial material worth hundreds of millions that you can't prove you legally own yet. Lisa shook her head. We need to make your ownership legally unassailable before we can claim official protection. Right now, you're just a woman with disputed property and unverified claims about its value. She pulled out a laptop. Let me show you something. The screen displayed satellite imagery of the Impact Research Station, dated from 3 days ago. Sarah recognized the facility, but there was something new. A vehicle parked near the access road, monitoring equipment visible. That's Stellardine, Lisa said. They've had surveillance on the facility since your father's death. They've been waiting to see who inherited it and what they do with it. Another image, this one from yesterday, a different vehicle, different equipment, clearly a separate operation. That's likely Russian interests. They're more cautious, but just as determined. A third image showed what looked like military-grade observation technology. Chinese state interests, probably through private contractors. They've been aggressively acquiring rare element sources worldwide. Sarah stared at the images, feeling the weight of what she'd inherited multiply with each new revelation. Her father hadn't just left her a fortune. He'd left her something multiple superpowers wanted, something that could shift technological balance, something people would absolutely kill for. How did my father protect this for 30 years? Very carefully, Lisa said. and by being completely unremarkable. He published occasionally on mundane meteor topics, maintained a reputation as a competent but unexceptional researcher, lived quietly in Chicago, never gave any indication he'd found anything significant. The perfect cover. But something changed. Lisa nodded. He got cancer. Terminal diagnosis, maybe 6 months. Suddenly, he had a deadline. Had to arrange for the vault's transfer to someone who could protect it. That's when he started getting sloppy, making arrangements, updating his will, reaching out to me and others for help. That's when people started paying attention. Do you think someone causes illness? The question hung heavy in the kitchen. Lisa met her eyes. I think your father believed that was possible. He mentioned in our correspondence that he'd felt increasingly unwell in ways that didn't match his official diagnosis timeline. But proving it would be impossible and focusing on it won't help you now. Sarah felt cold fury at the thought that her father might have been murdered. His cancer somehow induced or accelerated to force the vault's transfer before he could properly protect it. But Lisa was right, proving it was impossible and, more importantly, useless. The threat was immediate and present. What do I do? Tomorrow, we establish your case. Documentation, verification, legal foundations. We make it costly enough to take the material from you that even the most aggressive interests will prefer to negotiate. And if they don't want to negotiate? Lisa's expression was grim. Then we make sure the world knows what you have before anyone can disappear it. Complete publicity, maximum documentation, viral revelation. Make it impossible to quietly steal because everyone's watching. That sounds dangerous. It is. But the alternative is letting someone take it and hoping you survive the theft. Lisa closed her laptop. Your father chose you because you're brilliant, because you have his moral compass, and because you're desperate enough to be brave. Trust those qualities. They'll get you through this. Sarah spent what remained of the night on Lisa's couch, Emma curled against her side, the backpack containing $40 million in samples sitting on the floor nearby. Every creak of the house made her start. Every passing car headlight through the windows made her check that the doors were locked. But somehow, exhaustion eventually claimed her, and she slept. Morning came with Emma tugging her sleeve. Mom, there's a fancy breakfast here. Can I eat it? Sarah opened her eyes to find Lisa in the kitchen, preparing what looked like a full spread: eggs, toast, fruit, coffee. Real coffee, not the instant kind Sarah had been subsisting on for months. Eat, Lisa said. Both of you. We have a long day ahead. Over breakfast, Lisa briefed Sarah on what to expect at the museum. Grant Fletcher was respected, trustworthy, but ultimately he answered to a board that would prioritize the museum's interests. He might offer partnership, acquisition, or simply verification. It depended on how he assessed both the material and Sarah's vulnerability. Don't accept any offers today, Lisa advised. Even generous ones. We need competitive pressure, multiple parties bidding for access or partnership. That's how you maximize value and maintain control. At 8:30, they loaded into Lisa's van, the precious samples secure in Sarah's backpack. The Denver Museum of Natural History was a massive complex in City Park, its distinctive architecture dominating the skyline. Lisa dropped them at the entrance. I'll be nearby, she said. Text me when you're done. And Sarah, trust your instincts. Your father did. Sarah and Emma climbed the museum steps, passing beneath towering columns into a grand entrance hall. A receptionist directed them to the research wing, where Grant Fletcher waited. He was younger than Sarah expected, maybe 50, with the lean build of someone who'd spent time in the field, salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He greeted them warmly, his handshake firm. Dr. Chen, I'm so glad you came. And you must be Emma. He smiled at her daughter. Your grandfather used to tell me stories about you. That simple statement, delivered with genuine warmth, broke through Sarah's defensive walls slightly. This man had known her father, had heard him talk proudly about his granddaughter. Fletcher led them through the research wing to a private laboratory. I've cleared my schedule for the morning. Whatever you've brought, we'll examine it properly with full documentation. Sarah carefully extracted the samples, setting them on an examination table. Even in the laboratory's bright lights, they were spectacular. Fletcher went absolutely still, his hand hovering over the meteor fragment without touching it. James actually did it, he whispered. He actually found stellar condensate. He looked at Sarah with new intensity. How much more is there? For tons, give or take. Fletcher sank into a chair, his professional composure cracking. For tons. Do you have any idea? He stopped, collected himself. Dr. Chen, what your father discovered is the most significant extraterrestrial find in human history. Not just scientifically, but economically, technologically. Nations would go to war over materials like this. Several entities seem to agree with you, Sarah said dryly. I've had offers, threats, and surveillance in the 48 hours since I discovered the vault. Fletcher's expression turned concerned. Then you understand the danger you're in. Please, let me help. The museum can provide security, legal support, resources to properly manage this discovery. In exchange, we'd ask for research access, perhaps samples for our collection, and the cultural credit of facilitating this find. What about ownership? Remains entirely yours. We'd structure it as partnership, not acquisition. You maintain control. We provide infrastructure and protection. It was a good offer, probably genuine. But Lisa's words echoed. Don't accept any offers today. I need to consider my options, Sarah said, and consult with my advisors. Of course. But Dr. Chen, please be careful who you trust. There are people who would rather steal this material than negotiate for it. As if summoned by those words, Fletcher's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then frowned. Security alert. Someone's trying to access the research wing without proper authorization. He stood, moving to his computer terminal. On the screen, Sarah could see security camera feeds showing the museum entrance. 3 men in suits were arguing with guards, showing credentials, demanding access to the research wing. Sarah recognized the lead man from Stellardine's helicopter visit, one of Victoria Ashford's security team. They've tracked you here, Fletcher said, already typing rapidly. I'm locking down this wing. But, Dr. Chen, they're showing federal credentials. We can only delay them, not refuse them. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stellardine has federal warrant for potentially dangerous extraterrestrial materials. They'll confiscate your samples. Get out. Now. LP. Lisa. Warning her the trap was closing. Is there another exit? Sarah asked urgently, already repacking the samples. Fletcher understood immediately. He grabbed a key card from his desk. Service elevator, 3rd floor. Takes you to underground parking. But Sarah, if you run with those samples, you'll look guilty of something. I'll look smart, Sarah countered, shouldering the backpack. Because if they confiscate this material under federal authority, I'll never see it again. It'll disappear into classified research, and my daughter and I will have nothing. Emma held her hand tightly as they moved into the hallway. Fletcher led them to a service elevator, his key card granting access. I meant what I said about the museum helping. When you're ready to come forward properly, call me. The elevator descended. Sarah watched the floor numbers drop, her heart hammering. 3rd floor. 2nd floor. 1st. The elevator stopped, doors remaining closed. That's not right, Fletcher said, swiping his key card again. Nothing happened. Sarah pulled out her phone. Another text from Lisa. Stellardine locked down museum systems. You're trapped. Fight or cooperate. Your choice. The backpack between Sarah's feet contained $40 million in samples, evidence of her inheritance, and potentially her only leverage against powerful interests that wanted to take everything from her. The elevator doors shuttered, began to open slowly, manually overridden from outside. Sarah made a choice. She pushed past Fletcher, pulling Emma with her, and ran. Sarah burst through the stairwell door with Emma's hand locked in hers, the backpack bouncing against her spine with every step. Behind them, she heard shouting, Fletcher arguing with the Stellardine operatives, buying precious seconds. Mom, I'm scared, Emma panted as they descended the stairs 2 at a time. I know, baby. We're going to be okay. Just keep moving. They hit the ground floor, and Sarah shoved through an emergency exit, alarm blaring. The underground parking garage spread before them, dimly lit, echoing. Lisa's van was supposed to be here somewhere, but Sarah couldn't see it in the maze of concrete pillars and parked vehicles. Her phone buzzed. Northwest corner. White van. Engine running. Sarah ran, Emma struggling to keep pace. Footsteps echoed behind them. The Stellardine team had entered the garage. A voice called out, professional but firm, "Dr. Chen, stop. We have federal authority. You're only making this harder." The white van appeared ahead, side door open. Lisa leaned out, gesturing frantically. Sarah practically threw Emma inside, diving in after her. The door slammed, and Lisa hit the accelerator before Sarah had even caught her breath. "Seatbelts," Lisa said calmly, navigating through the garage at dangerous speed. "This is going to get rough." They burst into daylight, Lisa making an immediate right turn that sent Sarah sliding across the bench seat. In the side mirror, Sarah saw two black SUVs pulling out of the museum parking area, clearly in pursuit. "They're following us," Sarah said. "I see them." Lisa's hands were steady on the wheel. "We're not going to outrun them in a van. We need to outsmart them." She pulled out her phone, made a call while steering with one hand. "David? It's Lisa. I need that favor. Museum District, white van, two black SUVs in pursuit. Can you help?" A pause as she listened. "Thank you. Yes, now would be good." Lisa dropped the phone and took a sharp left, then an immediate right, navigating residential streets with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of Denver's geography. The SUVs stayed with them, professional drivers who weren't deterred by Lisa's maneuvers. Then, 3 blocks ahead, Sarah saw what Lisa had arranged. 2 Denver police cruisers were positioned across the street, lights flashing, creating a roadblock. But Lisa didn't slow down. She accelerated directly toward them. "Lisa." At the last second, one cruiser pulled back, creating a gap just wide enough for the van. Lisa threaded through it, while officers moved to block the pursuing SUVs. Sarah heard shouting, sirens, the screech of brakes as Stellardine's vehicles were forced to stop. "Your friend has connections," Sarah said, heart still hammering. "David's a city councilman who believes in checking corporate overreach. He can't hold them long, maybe 10 minutes before they produce credentials and get released. But 10 minutes is enough." Lisa drove with purpose now, no longer fleeing, but navigating toward a specific destination. They pulled into an industrial area south of downtown, stopping outside a nondescript building with a small sign, Colorado Materials Analysis Lab. "What is this?" "The School of Mines laboratory I mentioned. We're doing the full verification now, while we have time." Lisa killed the engine. Stellardine showed federal credentials at the museum. That means they've escalated beyond corporate acquisition to claiming national security interest. We need independent scientific verification on record before they can classify your material and bury it. Inside, the laboratory was a maze of equipment and workstations. A young man in a lab coat greeted Lisa with familiarity. "Dr. Park, your confidential project is ready. Bay 3, all equipment calibrated." They settled Emma in a break room with snacks and a tablet loaded with educational videos. Then Sarah followed Lisa to a secure laboratory space. The samples came out of the backpack once more, and this time the analysis was exhaustive. Lisa worked with focused intensity, running every test available. Spectroscopy revealed elemental compositions that made her stop and rerun tests multiple times. Crystallography showed structures that defied conventional material science. Energy density measurements caused the equipment to require recalibration. "This is impossible," Lisa murmured, examining results. "These elements shouldn't be stable at Earth temperatures. The energy density is orders of magnitude beyond anything we've synthesized. And these crystalline matrices." She trailed off, making rapid calculations. Sarah watched over her shoulder, her own physics background allowing her to understand the implications. The material wasn't just rare, it represented physics operating under rules that Earth-based science had barely theorized about. "How much is it worth?" Sarah asked. "Really?" Lisa printed results, began compiling a formal report. "The samples you brought?" 50 million, conservatively. "The full vault deposit." She looked up, her expression grave. "Sarah, I need to revise my earlier estimate. Based on composition consistency and the exotic elements present, The total value approaches $900 million, possibly over $1 billion if the crystalline materials can be synthesized or cultivated. The number was so large it ceased to have meaning. Sarah tried to imagine $1 billion, failed completely, and instead focused on the practical reality. She was now dealing with something worth more than many small nations' GDP. "We need to go public," Lisa said. "Full disclosure, complete documentation, viral revelation. Make it impossible for anyone to quietly confiscate this material because the whole world is watching. Won't that make me an even bigger target?" Yes, but a visible target is harder to disappear than a hidden one. Right now, you're just a single mother with disputed property that powerful interests want to acquire quietly. Once you're Dr. Sarah Chen, discoverer of the most valuable extraterrestrial deposit in history, you're international news. Any harm that comes to you becomes suspicious. Any theft becomes a global scandal. Sarah thought about Emma, about the life she'd been trying to rebuild from the wreckage David had left. Going public meant no more anonymity, no more ability to quietly slip away if things went wrong. It meant committing fully to this fight. But running hadn't worked. Hiding hadn't protected them. Maybe visibility was the only real safety. What do we need to do? Lisa was already making calls. "I have contacts at Science Today, Nature, and the New York Times. We release simultaneously to all three: scientific verification, human interest story, and economic implications. They'll run it within hours, and by tomorrow morning, you'll be famous. My siblings are going to lose their minds." Lisa smiled grimly. "Your siblings are going to realize they tried to steal something worth $1 billion while thinking it was worthless. The lawsuit they filed will become an embarrassment. The settlement they offered will look insulting. And the judge hearing their case will see exactly what kind of people they are." Over the next 3 hours, while Emma napped in the break room and Stellardine presumably searched Denver for them, Sarah and Lisa crafted the revelation that would change everything. The scientific paper documented the material's composition, properties, and significance, with full verification for the Colorado Materials Analysis Lab. Lisa's reputation as a USGS mineralogist gave it credibility that Sarah alone couldn't have provided. The press release told the human story. Homeless single mother inherits apparently worthless property, discovers fortune hidden by brilliant father who spent decades protecting cosmic treasure. The narrative was compelling, sympathetic, and most importantly, true. The economic analysis broke down the material's value, compared it to rare element markets, and projected the impact on various industries. Conservative estimates only, Lisa insisted. Better to be proven right than to seem like they were exaggerating. By 6 p.m., it was done. Lisa hit send simultaneously to all three outlets, complete with supporting documentation, photographs of the samples, and Sarah's contact information. "Now we wait," Lisa said. 12 hours maximum before this explodes. In the meantime, you need to be somewhere safe, surrounded by witnesses impossible to isolate." "Where?" Lisa smiled. "The Brown Palace Hotel. Downtown, historic, expensive, and most importantly, the lobby is always full of people. Stellardine can't touch you in a crowd with cameras everywhere." They checked into the Brown Palace under Lisa's name, booking a suite that made Sarah wince at the cost until Lisa reminded her that by tomorrow, money would be the least of her worries. Emma was delighted by the fancy room, the enormous bed, the room service menu that seemed impossibly luxurious after months of gas station food. Sarah tried to eat, but couldn't. Her phone was buzzing constantly now. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, messages from people who shouldn't have had her contact information. She ignored them all, watching the clock tick toward the moment when their revelation would hit. At 9 p.m., the first article dropped. Nature's website published Lisa's scientific paper with an accompanying editorial about the discovery's implications. The headline read, "Stellar condensate, previously theoretical material found in Alaska deposit worth billions." At 9:15, Science Today published the human interest angle, from homeless to billionaire. Single mother's inheritance reveals father's cosmic secret. At 9:30, the New York Times ran with the economic story, Alaska Meteor deposit valued at $1 billion could reshape rare element markets. By 10 p.m., the story had been picked up by CNN, BBC, Reuters, and every major news outlet globally. Sarah's phone was now unusable, overwhelmed by calls and messages. News vans were reportedly gathering outside the Brown Palace. Lisa watched the media storm from her laptop, monitoring social media, tracking the story spread. It's viral. Twitter's exploding. Scientists are calling it the find of the century. Economists are speculating about market impact. And most importantly, she pulled up a news alert. Stellardine stock is down 8% in after-hours trading. Their board is demanding explanations for why they didn't secure the material before it became public knowledge. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. Let them scramble. Let them explain to their shareholders why they tried to steal a billion-dollar discovery instead of negotiating fairly. Her phone rang, one of the few numbers she recognized. Marcus. She answered, putting it on speaker. What have you done? Her brother's voice was apoplectic. You just told the world about material worth $1 billion? Are you insane? You've made yourself a target for every criminal organization on the planet. Hello, Marcus. Nice to hear from you too. This isn't funny, Sarah. Victoria and I are your family. We should have been consulted before you went public with something this significant. You mean you would have liked the opportunity to steal it from me more efficiently? Silence on the line. Then Marcus's voice, lower and more dangerous. We're not trying to steal from you. We're trying to protect you from making catastrophic mistakes. You're not equipped to handle something like this. And yet, somehow I managed. Discovered the vault, secured samples, obtained independent verification, and established public claim before anyone could quietly confiscate it. I'd say I'm handling it fine. Victoria's voice joined the call. They'd both been listening. Sarah, you need legal counsel immediately. Federal authorities will be asserting claims. Foreign governments will make overtures. You cannot navigate this alone. I'm not alone. I have advisors. Scientists who understand the material, lawyers who specialize in mineral rights, and most importantly, I have public scrutiny. Everyone's watching now. If anything happens to me or Emma, the whole world will ask why. You just painted a target on both your backs, Victoria said coldly. Congratulations on your newfound fame. Let's hope it doesn't get you killed. They hung up. Sarah looked at Lisa. They're right about one thing. I didn't need legal counsel. Already arranged. Margot Sullivan, best intellectual property attorney in Colorado. She handles complex mineral rights, international trade law, and corporate warfare. She's meeting us here tomorrow at 8 a.m. That night, Sarah barely slept. She kept checking news coverage, watching her story spread globally. Scientists were debating the material's properties. Economists were modeling market impacts. Environmentalists were raising questions about extraction and preservation. Politicians were making statements about American scientific achievement. And through it all, people were asking, who is Dr. Sarah Chen? By morning, the answer was everywhere. Interviews with her former colleagues at the university praising her brilliance. Stories about her divorce and unemployment, painting her as sympathetic underdog. Photographs of Emma, which made Sarah uncomfortable despite understanding their narrative value. Single mother doing everything to protect her child. The transformation from invisible to visible had happened literally overnight. Margot Sullivan arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, designer suit, and the bearing of someone who'd fought and won battles that would have destroyed lesser attorneys. Dr. Chen, I've reviewed your situation. It's complex, but not hopeless. She spread documents across the suite's dining table. First, the good news. Your father's documentation is excellent. Property ownership is clear. The material was discovered on private land, excavated legally, and maintained properly. Federal authorities will have a hard time making confiscation claims stick. And the bad news? Your siblings' lawsuit creates complications. While they're clearly in the wrong, the existence of contested ownership gives federal agencies an excuse to freeze assets pending resolution. We need to get that dismissed immediately. Ow! Margot smiled. By making them look like exactly what they are, wealthy individuals trying to steal from their struggling sister. Public opinion is already on your side. We'll amplify that, make it politically toxic for any judge to rule in their favor. She pulled out her phone. I've arranged for you to give an interview this afternoon. 60 Minutes is sending a crew. You'll tell your story, the homelessness, your father's secret, the discovery, your siblings' attempts to steal it. By the time it airs Sunday night, Marcus and Victoria will be pariahs. That seems harsh. They threatened to take your daughter away, to force you to surrender $1 billion inheritance. They deserve harsh. Margot's expression softened slightly. Dr. Chen, in cases like this, public sympathy is armor. The more people see you as a sympathetic figure defending what's rightfully yours, the harder it becomes for powerful interests to take it from you. Over the next several days, Sarah's life became a whirlwind of interviews, legal meetings, and strategic positioning. The 60 Minutes piece aired to massive viewership, Sarah's story resonating with millions who saw themselves in her struggle. Homeless mother makes good. Brilliant father's final gift. Greedy siblings get their comeuppance. The narrative was powerful because it was true. Marcus and Victoria tried to control damage, issuing statements about family concern and proper management of valuable materials. No one believed them. Their lawsuit became a public relations disaster, with legal commentators openly mocking their claims. The judge hearing their case, facing immense public pressure, dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice. No grounds for contesting the will. No evidence of diminished capacity. No justification for interfering with Sarah's clear inheritance. It was over in 2 weeks, faster than anyone had predicted. But the larger complications were just beginning. Federal authorities did attempt to assert interest in the material, claiming it fell under regulations governing extraterrestrial objects of scientific importance. Margot shut them down with arguments about property rights and precedent, threatening lengthy litigation that would make the government look like it was stealing from a widow and child. They backed off, but Sarah knew it was temporary. They'd try again through different channels, different justifications. Foreign governments made overtures, China offering research partnerships, Russia suggesting development arrangements, Europe proposing international consortium management. All were politely declined, and corporations came calling. Not just Stellardyne, but dozens of major materials companies, aerospace firms, energy corporations, each wanted to negotiate for access, for samples, for partnership in exploitation of the deposit. Sarah took meetings with them all, accompanied by Margot and Lisa, learning to navigate negotiations where billions of dollars hung on single contract clauses. It was exhausting, overwhelming, and necessary. 3 months after discovering the vault, Sarah stood once again in the Impact Research Station. But this time, she wasn't alone. Security personnel that Margot had vetted now guarded the facility. Scientific teams that Lisa had assembled were conducting proper analysis of the full deposit. Engineers were designing extraction systems that would preserve the material's unique properties. And Emma was in school in Anchorage, enrolled in the best private academy available, no longer sleeping in cars or surviving on peanut butter sandwiches. Thomas greeted Sarah at the entrance, his weathered face creasing in a smile. Place is busier than it's been in 30 years. Your father would be pleased. They walked through the facility together, Thomas pointing out improvements, upgraded security, new environmental systems, laboratory spaces being constructed for on-site research. The old man knew what he was doing, Thomas said. Hiding it all this time, waiting for someone who'd use it right. In her father's old office, Sarah found something she'd missed during her initial exploration. A final letter, hidden in a false bottom drawer, meant to be discovered only after everything else had played out. Sarah, if you're reading this, you've survived. You've fought off those who want to take what was yours. You've protected Emma. You've honored the trust one placed in you. I'm proud of you. I always was, even when I couldn't find the words to say it. The vault was never just about money, though I knew you'd need that desperately. It was about proving to yourself that you're capable of protecting something valuable, of standing up to powerful interests, of trusting your own judgment, even when everyone doubted you. Marcus and Victoria got conventional inheritances because they think conventionally. They'll use what I gave them competently, grow it predictably, and be satisfied with success measured in dollars and status. But you, Sarah, you needed something different. You needed a challenge that would force you to discover strengths you didn't know you had. You needed to learn that being underestimated is an advantage, not a weakness. You needed to understand that the most valuable things are often those that others dismiss. Use the material wisely. Fund research that matters. Provide for Emma's future, but not so much that she never learns to strive. And remember that cosmic treasures are less valuable than human connections. Don't let wealth isolate you from people who truly care. I love you. I believe in you. And I know you'll do remarkable things with what I've left you. Dad. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her father had seen her, truly seen her. Not as the failed daughter who couldn't keep her marriage together or her job, but as someone capable of extraordinary things if given the right opportunity. He'd been right. That evening, Sarah stood in the impact chamber, looking down at the open vault. The crystalline formations glowed softly, patient as they'd been for 30 years, waiting to transform science, technology, and human understanding of the cosmos. Grant Fletcher from the Denver Museum had flown up for the formal partnership signing. Sarah had agreed to provide samples for research and display, in exchange for the museum's expertise in preservation and public education. It was a good arrangement, honoring both scientific importance and economic value. Your father would have loved this, Grant said, standing beside her. He spent so many years protecting it alone. Now it'll benefit the whole world. Sarah had also established agreements with Lisa's team at the Colorado School of Mines, with NASA for comparative analysis of the material's cosmic origins, and with carefully vetted private companies for eventual sustainable extraction. The material was being shared, studied, protected, exactly as her father had intended. But Sarah kept the majority secured, establishing a trust that would fund research grants, scholarships for students in astrophysics and material science, and support for families facing circumstances like those she'd endured. The Sarah and James Chen Foundation would ensure that others who'd been dismissed, underestimated, or overlooked would get chances to prove their worth. 6 months after the discovery, Sarah moved into a house in Anchorage. Not huge, not ostentatious, but comfortable. Emma had her own room, decorated with posters of planets and astronauts. Sarah had a home office where she could work on research she'd dreamed of conducting for years, but never had resources to pursue. The Honda Civic that had been their home for 3 months sat in the garage, kept as a reminder of where they'd been, what they'd survived. Marcus called one evening, his voice subdued. The foundation you established gave a grant to a researcher I know. She's brilliant, but couldn't get conventional funding because her ideas were too unconventional. That's exactly what it's for. A long pause. Dad saw something in you that Victoria, and I didn't. I'm sorry it took losing $1 billion for me to realize that. You didn't lose $1 billion, Marcus. You inherited 50 million. That's still more than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But you got what mattered. The real treasure wasn't the material. It was the proof that he believed in you. After Marcus hung up, Sarah sat in her office, looking at the framed photograph of her father in his laboratory, surrounded by meteor fragments and star charts, his expression intense with concentration and wonder. He'd given her so much more than wealth. He'd given her validation, purpose, and the opportunity to transform not just her own life, but countless others through the foundation, through the research that would flow from the material's discovery, through the example of someone who'd been dismissed and underestimated, proving everyone wrong. The Meteor material would change technology, would enable breakthroughs in energy and material science, would potentially revolutionize multiple industries. But the real impact, Sarah thought, was simpler and more profound. Her father had looked at his 3 children and made a choice. He'd given Marcus and Victoria what they valued: money, property, conventional success. But to Sarah, he'd given something priceless: the chance to discover she was stronger than anyone realized, including herself. The Impact Vault had held cosmic treasure worth $1 billion. But the real treasure had been the journey of discovering it, the proof that she could protect something valuable, that she could stand up to powerful interests, that she could transform apparent disaster into triumph. Emma called from downstairs. "Mom, come see. The aurora's amazing tonight." Sarah joined her daughter on the back deck. The northern lights danced across the sky in waves of green and purple, cosmic energy made visible, a reminder that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. "It's like the crystals in Grandpa's vault," Emma said. "The same colors." Sarah pulled Emma close. "Your grandfather spent his whole life studying the cosmos. He wanted us to understand that we're made of stardust, that the elements in our bodies were forged in the hearts of dying stars. The material in the vault, that's stellar matter, actual pieces of stars that traveled millions of years through space to reach us. That's what makes it valuable. That's what makes it precious," Sarah corrected. "Value is just what people will pay. Preciousness is about significance, about connection, about meaning that goes beyond money." Emma considered this with the seriousness of a child learning fundamental truths. Like how Grandpa leaving us the vault was precious because it meant he believed in us. Exactly like that. They stood together, watching the aurora, while somewhere below them the impact vault held its cosmic secrets, and somewhere beyond them the stars wheeled through infinite darkness, and somewhere in the space between, Sarah Chen felt gratitude for a father who'd seen what she could become and left her the tools to achieve it. The frozen Meteor lab had been worth far more than $1 billion. It had been worth everything. 2 years after discovering the vault, Sarah Chen stood on a stage at the International Astrophysics Conference in Geneva, facing 3,000 of the world's leading scientists. The auditorium was silent as she concluded her presentation on the stellar condensate research that had emerged from her father's discovery. Behind her, images showed the crystalline structures at the molecular level, revealing patterns that were rewriting textbooks on stellar nucleosynthesis. "In conclusion," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, "the impact research station materials have confirmed theoretical models we'd only imagined. We now have physical evidence of element formation in supernova events, of compression states that shouldn't exist outside stellar cores, and of energy storage mechanisms that could revolutionize everything from medicine to space exploration." She paused, looking out at faces she recognized. Colleagues who'd once dismissed her, professors who'd written recommendation letters when she was just starting out, scientists whose work had inspired her own journey. But more than the scientific implications, this discovery reminds us that the universe still holds surprises. That persistence matters. That sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look. The applause was thunderous. Backstage, Emma waited with Lisa Park, now 9 years old and wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, covered in stars and planets, naturally. She hugged Sarah fiercely. "You were amazing, Mom. Grandpa would be so proud." Lisa smiled. "The presentation was brilliant, Sarah, but have you seen this?" She held up her phone, showing a news alert. The headline read, "Stellardyne Corporation files bankruptcy following failed Alaska acquisition attempt and subsequent scandals." Sarah scanned the article. Victoria Ashford had been ousted as acquisitions director. The aggressive tactics they'd used trying to secure the Meteor materials had triggered investigations into other questionable dealings. Their stock had never recovered from the initial plunge when Sarah went public. "I almost feel bad," Sarah said. "Almost." "Don't," Lisa replied. "They tried to steal a billion-dollar discovery from a homeless single mother. The universe has a way of balancing accounts." That evening, Sarah video called with Marcus and Victoria, separately now, as their relationship had fractured over blame for the lawsuit disaster. Marcus appeared on screen from his office in Chicago, looking tired but more genuine than she'd seen him in years. "Congratulations on the Geneva presentation," he said. "I watched it online. You've become what Dad always said you would be, a leading voice in your field." "Thank you, Marcus. I wanted you to know, I've been volunteering with your foundation, reviewing grant applications, using my business experience to help researchers who don't understand how to navigate funding processes." He paused. "It doesn't make up for what Victoria and I tried to do, but it's something." Sarah felt a complicated mixture of emotions. Forgiveness wasn't simple or complete, but it was possible. Dad left you Chen Industries because he knew you'd run it well. He left me the vault because he knew I needed a different kind of inheritance. Maybe we both got what we needed. Maybe, Marcus agreed. Though I think he got the better deal. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. After disconnecting, Sarah found Victoria's email waiting. Her sister had written rather than called. Typical Victoria, always more comfortable with carefully constructed words than spontaneous conversation. Sarah, I've spent 2 years being angry. At Dad for the will, at you for going public, at myself for not seeing what was really happening. I hired therapists who pointed out that my entire identity was built on being the successful one, the achiever, the daughter who did everything right. When Dad left you something worth 10 times what he left me, it shattered that identity. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for understanding. And I want you to know that I've established a scholarship fund in Dad's name, funding law students who want to work in property rights and inheritance law. Maybe I can help other families avoid the mistakes ours made. The Meteor materials have saved lives. The medical applications alone are extraordinary. You've done something Dad would be incredibly proud of. I'm trying to learn to be proud too, rather than envious. Victoria. Sarah read the email twice, then filed it away to think about later. Reconciliation with her siblings was ongoing, complicated, probably never complete. But it was real, more honest than their relationship had been when they were all just playing roles Dad had assigned them. The next morning, Sarah and Emma flew to Anchorage, then took a charter plane to the Impact Research Station. The facility had been transformed in 2 years. New buildings surrounded the original structure. Laboratories where 30 scientists now worked full-time, housing for researchers, even a small school that Emma attended remotely when they stayed for extended periods. Thomas greeted them at the landing pad, now officially the facility's operations director rather than just the caretaker. Dr. Chen, Emma, welcome home. Home. The word fit better than Sarah expected. The research station had become more than just the site of her inheritance. It was the center of groundbreaking research, the place where cosmic mysteries were being unraveled, the foundation of everything she'd built. They walked to the main laboratory, where her team was preparing for the day's work. Dr. James Morrison, the lead material scientist Sarah had recruited from MIT, looked up from his workstation. Dr. Chen, you need to see this. We've successfully synthesized a stable compound using the crystalline matrix as a template. The energy density is off the charts. Sarah examined the data, her pulse quickening. If they could replicate the stellar condensate's properties artificially, the implications went beyond even the natural deposit's value. Have you tested stability over time? 72 hours so far, completely stable. Sarah, this could mean unlimited applications without depleting the natural deposit. It was the breakthrough they'd been working toward, a way to honor her father's discovery while ensuring the vault's materials weren't simply mined to exhaustion. If they could synthesize similar compounds, the original deposit could remain largely intact, studied, and preserved for future generations while still benefiting humanity. That afternoon, Sarah descended once more to the impact chamber. The vault's hatch opened to reveal treasures that still took her breath away. Crystals glowing with impossible light, meteor fragments veined with stellar metal, for tons of cosmic matter worth more than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. But the value wasn't the point anymore. She thought about the woman who'd stood here 2 years ago, homeless, desperate, unsure of everything except her love for Emma and her determination to survive. That woman had been tested by circumstances beyond anything she'd imagined, had discovered strengths she didn't know she possessed, had learned that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage. Her father had known, had planned for exactly this transformation. Sarah pulled out the compass Rebecca had given her, the one her father had carried throughout his years protecting the vault. The needle still pointed true north, unwavering, exactly as James Chen had been unwavering in his conviction that Sarah was the right inheritor for this cosmic treasure. Emma appeared at the chamber entrance. "Mom?" Thomas said, "Dinner's ready." "Coming, sweetheart." As they climbed back to the surface, Emma asked, "Do you think Grandpa knew how everything would turn out?" Sarah considered the question carefully. I think he knew what I was capable of, even when I didn't. He gave me an opportunity disguised as a burden, a fortune hidden in apparent abandonment. He trusted me to figure it out. And you did. We did, Sarah corrected. You and me together. We survived homelessness, discovered cosmic treasure, fought off people who wanted to steal it, and built something that would have made him proud. That evening, Sarah stood outside the facility watching the aurora borealis dance across the Arctic sky. The lights painted the frozen landscape in shades that matched the crystals in the vault below, greens and purples and colors that existed between known spectrums. Her phone buzzed with a message from Grant Fletcher at the Denver Museum. The new wing opens next month. The James Chen Memorial Exhibit will showcase the stellar condensate discovery alongside your father's life work. It's going to be spectacular. Another message, this one from Margot Sullivan. Final audit complete. Foundation endowment now stands at $850 million. You're funding the next generation of scientists who will build on what your father started. And one more, from Thomas. Northern lights are particularly beautiful tonight. Your father used to say they were the universe showing off. I think tonight it's celebrating what you've accomplished. Sarah looked up at the aurora, at the cosmic light show that had been painting Arctic skies since long before humans existed and would continue long after humanity was gone. The universe was vast, indifferent, beautiful, and occasionally, very occasionally, it delivered gifts. A meteor carrying stellar condensate, traveling millions of years through the void, impacting precisely where her father would find it. Cosmic dice rolled across space and time, landing in a combination that would change one family's story and ultimately benefit all of humanity. Some would call it luck. Sarah preferred to think of it as her father's persistence finally being rewarded, his decades of searching validated in the most spectacular way possible. She thought about Marcus finding his own path to redemption through the Foundation. About Victoria, learning that achievement wasn't the same as worth. About Emma, growing up knowing she was loved, secure, capable of anything she dreamed. And she thought about herself, no longer the woman sleeping in her car, no longer defined by divorce or unemployment or her siblings' dismissal. Now she was Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the Impact Research Station, steward of humanity's most significant extraterrestrial discovery, creator of a foundation that would fund research for generations. But most importantly, she was someone who'd learned what her father had known all along. That value isn't measured in dollars, but in courage, in integrity, in the willingness to protect something precious even when the whole world wants to take it away. The Meteor Lab had been worth $1 billion. The journey to claim it had been priceless. Emma joined her outside, slipping her hand into Sarah's. It's beautiful. Yes, it is. Grandpa left us something amazing. Sarah pulled her daughter close, both of them watching the northern lights paint the sky in cosmic colors. He left us everything, sweetheart. Not just the vault, but the proof that we were worth believing in. Above them, stars wheeled through infinite darkness. Below them, cosmic treasure waited in its vault. Around them, the frozen Arctic night held its breath. And Sarah Chen, who'd been given $1 and a frozen building as inheritance, who discovered a billion-dollar fortune hidden in apparent abandonment, who transformed cosmic matter into human possibility, finally understood her father's greatest gift. Not the money, not even the discovery, but the absolute, unwavering belief that she was capable of extraordinary things. He'd been right. The Impact Vault had changed everything, not because of what it contained, but because of what it had proven Sarah could become. And that was worth more than all the stellar condensate in the universe.